Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this third webinar on online stakeholder engagement, organized by the Secretariat of the Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition of the European Commission. My name is Stefania Xidia, and I am a Governance and Social Innovation Officer at ICLEI, the global network of local and regional developments committed to sustainable urban development. Together with my colleagues Valeria Eirin and Martin Freire from ICLEI's Communications and Member Relations team, we are supporting the Secretariat in organizing this webinar series. Last June, we hosted a first webinar focusing on the 5 W's of stakeholder engagement, providing an introduction to key concepts and tools, sharing tips and tricks for designing stakeholder engagement processes in digital spaces. In early July, we focused on online workshops and presented different methods and tools for engaging small groups of stakeholders in co-creation activities. Today, in this last webinar, we will focus on larger multi-stakeholder consultations and how we can adapt tested methodologies in virtual environments.
But first, here are some housekeeping guidelines to ensure smooth running of our session today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you on YouTube. To respect everyone's privacy and to have a smooth run of the event, microphones and cameras are being disabled. If you use the chat to interact with one another, and you can also leave a Q&A question to us. If you encounter any technical issue, write a private message to our colleague Martin Freire, who will do his best to support you.
So before we start today, we would like to ask you 2 questions using Slido polling. You may remember that this allows us also to test this online polling tool, which is useful to get audience feedback during online events through multiple choice or open questions. So you can use the link and password that Martin will paste in the chat, and let us know if you participated in the previous 2 webinars or if you're joining us today for the first time. That will give us a sense of whether we're building on the previous webinars and to avoid some repetitions. Okay, so I can see we have some participants already that are participating. Okay, you have participated in the first one or both. Do we have somebody that has not participated? Okay, we do.
We have a
Okay.
new participant here.
Okay, so welcome to the new participants. You can always catch up using the recordings that are available on YouTube of the first 2 webinars. So today we will try to cover both the completely new participants and the ones that have been consistent from the first part of the series. Now, using the same tool and the same hashtag, please share with us your foresight about the future of multi-stakeholder consultations. Many things have changed in the past year, and we're wondering, in the context of your just transition efforts, do you foresee a return to mainly physical events? Do you see a prevalence of hybrid processes, or do you think that we will move to a future of mainly virtual consultations? So please visit Slido again and use this poll to let us know what you predict for the future. I can see a preference or a prediction for
hybrid events.
Hybrid events, indeed. A lot of our communities, organizations have been very well trained in the past year in online conferencing and using different tools. So indeed, we can see that these will continue to be used, but very often combined with some activities in the physical space. So today, thank you for your participation. I see here we have an agreement on the future of our online consultations, and we will try to cover this today by presenting tools that are both online, offline, and can be used in hybrid formats too. So today, we will focus on methods that can enable participation in multi-stakeholder consultation processes. This can be useful when engaging larger audiences or different groups of stakeholders, combining information sessions, public debate, social learning, and voting. Looking back at this initial slide with the 3 levels of engagement, we will focus on techniques that cover both information, consultation, and cooperation needs for just transition at local or regional level, starting with one-way interaction formats and then ending and moving on with more self-organized and bottom-up processes.
So concretely, in our webinar today, we will present the following 5 methods, providing an overview of each process, highlighting its advantages, and also sharing some tips for online implementation of each method. Namely, we will talk about lightning talks, town hall meetings, Fishbowl, World Café, and finally, open space. Unfortunately, the limited time frame and the format of this webinar series have not allowed us for live simulation of these methods, but we hope that our inputs or our examples will inspire you to further conduct some research and maybe experiment in your context.
So, in the context of coal regions, multi-stakeholder consultation involves the development of constructive, productive dialogue with individuals and organizations that are directly affected by the local transition process. It enables us to identify needs and expectations, trends, and emerging challenges which are currently or will in the future impact local just transition efforts. Listening to stakeholder concerns and feedback is a valuable source of information that can be used to improve the design and outcomes of our action plans and help identify and control external risks. It can also form the basis, of course, for future collaborations and new partnerships. So as shown in this slide, in order to enable multi-stakeholder consultation, one needs to align the planning, the process, the presentation, and the promise made to participants. If you remember in the first webinar with the 5 W's, we stressed how important it is to keep the consistency between why we seek consultation, who we engage, and how, and what exactly we promise, because so we can avoid boomerang effects in public debates. So in our previous webinar, we discussed how depth of insights can be achieved through workshops and focus groups, which usually place quality over quantity of insights. Today, we will focus on public meetings and open online debates to celebrate breadth of opinions and provide multiple perspectives on burning issues.
In this context, it is important to remind ourselves of the benefits, but also of the limitations of online stakeholder consultation processes. For example, when going online, we can see that it provides a more green and cost-effective solution because it saves some expenses of the organization of the event, and it also offers a quick and efficient way to gather quantitative and qualitative data, right? But at the same time, we also know that in the past year, the online meeting fatigue has increased, and a lot of people had felt excluded because there's a digital gap dividing them. At the same time, we are relying a lot on software and hardware uh, functions. So sometimes not everything is perfect, and we need to remember them. So you need to be very careful when considering when and why are you going to go for an online consultation, and what is the most meaningful and efficient way than maybe going for a physical consultation, and whether a hybrid process, as many of you predicted, might be the most suitable solution for our needs.
So in the previous webinar, we spoke about complementary digital solutions. Just as in the online workshops we presented, larger online consultation processes can benefit from digital tools that cover these different needs. Hence, the methods that we will present today can be supported by, firstly, an online event platform that enables presentations and discussions in plenary format, but also in breakout rooms. Secondly, virtual whiteboard tools enable to display visual information in sticky notes, info cards, or graphs, and this can be produced by the facilitation team or even co-created and enhanced by participants. As we will see in due course, whiteboards designed on Miro or Mural or similar tools can also be used to design a virtual environment that enables you to assign different breakout rooms to different tables, rooms, even islands, we will see. You can get creative and create these virtual spaces on these whiteboard tools. The third category of tools that can be useful but is rather optional concerns file sharing in case you want to distribute shared files before, during, or after the consultation process. Finally, an extra category of tools that can help gather feedback, quantitative and qualitative data in a fun and efficient manner are these live surveys and polls, which we will test again with this question.
So now we want you to go back to Slido because we want to see how familiar you are using the tools that my colleague just mentioned. So you can use the link on the chat or go back to slido.com and use the password to fill in the poll and let us know how familiar are you using them. Are you very familiar, somehow little, or not at all? So please let us know how you feel about this.
So we're talking about online conferencing, we're talking about whiteboards, shared files, or online polling. These are different categories, but our interest here is to what extent you have maybe used also the summer break to test or experiment with some of them. Okay, so there is some experience. It's good, so we can better align the webinar with maybe tools that you have already tested. So we will now dive into methods, into the methods part of our webinar. So take a deep breath and try to reflect how the following formats can support your just transition efforts at local, regional, national, or even international level.
So the first method that we are going to present to you today are the lighting talks, which are also known as Pecha Kucha and Ignite talks, with different slide rules, different rules among them. The main characteristic of the three types is to present ideas, projects, policies, and in a fast, engaging way. And it also works very well also online as on-site, which is something very good to remember. Lighting talks aim to deliver a presentation in 5 minutes top, using between 5 to 10 slides containing mostly images and a maximum of 3 words in each one. In the case of Pecha Kucha, which means chit-chat in Japanese, the speaker must deliver slides in 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Sorry, 20 slides, I forgot to say. The presentation of each slide lasts for 20 seconds. And this is not all. The speaker has no control whatsoever over the slides, as the timekeeper is passing them, forcing the skipper to keep track on time. Finally, the Ignite talks last 5 minutes, in which the speaker must present 20 slides that auto-advance every 15 seconds. The advantages of these methods is that they take the audience on a journey using the power of visual storytelling, and it focuses on the human experience rather than the dry facts and figures. And therefore, it's useful to show the diversity of perspectives from different stakeholders in a very short time frame. Plus, it works fantastically as a conversation starter or an inspiration introduction when it's combined with other methods of consultation or conversation. But the big question now is how to meet such a challenge successfully. So here we have some tips for you or for your invited speakers. The first one is that the slides must be picture-centric, the minimum amount of text and high-quality visual content. Considering using the Takashahi method, which uses only 1 or 2 written words per slide, and no longer text than that. Secondly, develop a powerful pitch and deliver impactful content. Third, go straight to the point. There is no time to lose. Each slide should serve those main points with strong and relevant ideas. People want to discover something new, not to know everything about it. And have control over your script, facial expressions, body language, and finally, your vocal tone. When implementing such a presentation, you must first start with a strong introduction to awake your audience interest. Then explain super briefly why the topic is interesting and important. In the second half, one must try to summarize the main points that were covered on the first few items. And finally, end with a powerful call to action or question maybe, or even a message. Just like in archery, remember that practice makes the master. So you must use the method with enthusiastic stakeholders who are willing to practice a required amount of time to make this a success.
So let's move to the next method, which is called town hall meetings. This is a method that is developed mostly in the USA and aims to inform a community about a change that is coming, and at the same time get feedback on proposed policy or action plan. Town hall meetings enable local and national politicians to meet with their constituents in person, either to hear from them on topics of interest or to discuss specific upcoming legislation or regulation. Although there is no uniform methodology applied, town hall meetings usually involve opening remarks by political representatives, presentations of key facts on selected topics, and that's where Pechakucha or this kind of presentation format can be used, and then a round of Q&A and feedback with the audience, which is also the most important part of a town hall meeting. In case turnout is large, smaller discussion groups can be formed and questions or comments can be shared in the plenary by one representative of each group. Overall, this method requires good facilitation and conflict management skills by a professional, neutral mediator to respond to resistance to change, anger, or frustration that might be expressed by participants. In fact, very often town hall meetings become decompression opportunities for a community, so it's important to have the right people mediating the process. Town hall meetings work best when organized around concrete issues and soliciting input and feedback about political priorities. They enable stakeholders to identify areas of common ground, strengthening relationships and building trust within a community. Here you can see some snapshots of smaller and larger town hall meetings organized in physical spaces. The online version requires a professional, as said, neutral moderator or master of ceremony and clear ground rules, inviting a broad sample of constituents, providing brief, unbiased information on the issue in advance, focusing on a timely and specific issue, shared values, and nurturing common ground. It is important to provide oral communication from the political representative or relevant stakeholders to kickstart the conversation and allow for unscripted real-time interaction in discussion groups. In terms of the technical side, let's say of digital town hall meetings, we need the Chat functionality is very important to record questions and comments in written format. Screen sharing to visually share important information, especially at the time of the political presentation of the issue. Robust moderating capabilities to monitor participants' input and give everyone the chance to speak. Polling tool for live feedback can be extremely useful. And for transparency reasons, we would also recommend recording, but also live streaming of the session, either on the municipal, regional channels, or even social media. The technical infrastructure needs to be reliable and user-friendly, so depending on the infrastructure you have, you can decide what are the best online conferencing tools to use for an online town hall meeting. So the advantages of the online town hall meetings have been best described in this study, funded by the National Science Foundation in the USA, which analyzed the outcomes of 21 such online consultation processes with members of Congress across the USA. Of course, the context is a bit different, but I think it's relevant to see the results of this study, which indicates increased trust in the member of Congress, who is more likely to be described as accessible, fair, and compassionate. In terms of how they approach difficult topics, 58% of participants approved the session compared to 20% before the session. Interestingly, these online sessions were more likely than traditional venues to attract minorities, people from demographics not traditionally engaged in politics, and people frustrated with the political system. 95% of participants agreed that such sessions are very valuable for our democracy and that they would be interested in doing similar online sessions for other issues. Last but not least, participation in the town hall increased citizen engagement in politics. Participants were not only more likely to vote and follow elections in the news, but were more likely to try and persuade others to vote. So these discussions were meaningful, inspiring, and led to this multiplier effect within the community. An interesting version of town hall meetings are the so-called 21st century town meetings developed by the American NGO America Speaks, and these take place in hybrid formats. So these public forums use modern communication technologies to allow large number of participants across various locations to simultaneously deliberate on the same issue in small groups. In doing so, they aim to increase the number of participants without decreasing the quality of dialogue and deliberation. Quite a challenge. So in a four-step implementation process, special emphasis is put on a rigorous community outreach to ensure demographic representativeness based on census or other relevant data. So in this process, who participates is especially important to ensure that all the demographic groups are represented in an even manner. So how does a 21st century town meeting work? So imagine a room where participants are sat in round tables of 10 to 12 to encourage discussion and equal participation. Each of these groups is moderated by a trained facilitator, and a designated scribe records the proceeding on a laptop. Since widespread participation is sought in this meeting, each discussion group, so each table, is connected online with a larger conversation of thousands of people. This can be done through a municipal online forum, a dedicated hashtag on social media, an open wiki, or even a dedicated online event chat where additional people can join from outside the venue. Using collaborative software, the contents of tabled conversations are collected in real time and processed by a central theme team that attempts to discern the main viewpoints, positions, and themes that emerge from all the tables. The summaries of these results are available to all participants to comment and vote using online polling, just as the one we tested, but also individual electronic keypads, which can be distributed on site at the beginning of the process to provide immediate feedback. So in the European context, town hall meetings may not be such a common practice. However, more and more local authorities hold virtual open door sessions, our live stream Q&As with the mayor or with regional or municipal councillors, or organize thematic fora which convey the town hall meetings logic in terms of constituents coming closer to elected officials and vice versa. Now let's move on to our next method with a weird name.
This is a very weird name because it's called Fishbowl. The Fishbowl is an interactive and participatory method to structure a discussion and knowledge sharing session. Fishbowl conversations are used to discuss topics within large groups, allowing several people to join the discussion while avoiding the traditional conference formats of presentations and Q&As that sometimes, even on-site, can be boring. Fishbowls are not meant to reach consensus, but instead to generate an intimate and spontaneous conversation used for building dialogue between participants. So the big question is, how does this famous fishbowl work? Well, you have to imagine a public space or a large room where 5 chairs are arranged in the circle that looks just like a fishbowl. 4 of them are occupied, with 1 moderator and 3 initial speakers, while 1 chair is still empty. More chairs are then arranged in 1 or 2 concentric circles around the central inner circle. The moderator introduces the topic and poses the first question to initiate the fishbowl. A few participants thus the start of the fishbowl conversation, while the rest of the audience sits around and listens in to the main discussion. Every 2 to 10 minutes, any member of the audience can join the conversation by taking a seat on the empty chair, while one of the speakers voluntarily leaves the fishbowl, freeing another chair in the inner circle. If this doesn't happen smoothly, the moderator can invite the speaker to kindly step out and rejoin later, as to keep the empty seat in to a given time. So participants enter and leave the fishbowl, generating an ongoing flow, making the conversation much more interactive. When the set time is over, the moderator summarizes the discussion and officially closes the fishbowl. So to ensure the flow, it is very important to prepare a set of very good initial questions to pick the participants carefully. The moderator must ensure that no one dominates the talk and that the central fish is replaced regularly. On an online event, the framework doesn't vary too much. The fishbowl session is organized using an online conferencing platform moderated by a very experienced facilitator. The fishbowl sets up is recreated using a digital whiteboard, such as Miro that we have mentioned before, where participants appear as avatars with a seat in the inner or outer circle. Participants turn their cameras on to move in the inner circle and turn their cameras off to return to the outer circle. This is how the virtual fishbowl works, and participants can manage their avatars' positions in the fishbowl and change the seats at their please. The experience can enhance a role-playing game by which participants are asked to speak on behalf of their relevant personas. In the framework of the core regions in transition, this can be particularly interesting to exchange roles between policymakers, academics, business actors, and the civil society representatives. Among the advantages of this method, we can mention that it enables to address complex issues in a group of discussion. Second, it shortens the distances between the speakers and the audience, and it makes the hierarchies insignificant, as it enables participants to become custodians and also curators of the conversation. Fishbowls are also very useful to animate silent participants and to encourage everyone to participate in the discussion. Finally, it allows participants to exit the conversation at any point, allowing some self-organization in terms of breadth of the conversation and the depth in which contributors that want to dive into the topic.
So if the fishbowl is concentrated around one discussion circle, the next method, the World Café, enables many parallel circles of discussion to take place simultaneously. So the World Café is a powerful and thought-provoking method for engaging people in conversations that matter. The World Café makes use of an informal café setting to enable discussion in small groups, while at the same time harnessing the collective intelligence of 20, 50, up to 200 participants. Using multiple rounds of discussion as well as rotation between tables, it can facilitate large groups in sharing knowledge and creating possibilities for action. The World Café is organized around one powerful question that can stimulate discussion or an issue that genuinely matters to the work of your stakeholder group. For example, in the Coal Regions framework, a question could be, how do we imagine our region beyond coal? A question that can stimulate collective visioning and a release of imagination. Or what is our region's perspective on the territorial just transition plans? Something more concrete to bring out concrete agreements, disagreements, or feedback for the just transition plans developed at national level. So in physical spaces, this is how a World Café session look like: informal, cozy, and collaborative. On the left side, you can see a large-scale World Café which was focused on rewriting the constitution of Iceland. So that it may look informal, but the topic was quite serious. On the right side, you see small snapshots from smaller World Cafés engaging stakeholders on urban redevelopment projects in Greece. Here is an overview of how a World Café works in practice. So participants are seated in small cafe-style tables or in discussion groups of 4 to 6 people. One person volunteers to act as a table host, ensuring the discussion keeps evolving and some key insights are noted. The discussion is set up in progressive rounds of discussion, each lasting about 20 minutes. Each round can focus on a common question, or several questions may be used to build up the discussion. Participants are encouraged to write, doodle, or draw key ideas on the tablecloths or index cards or even placemats that can be found in the center of the table. After completing the initial round of conversations, participants rotate tables and the table host welcomes a new discussion group. So people move around the room and change tables as the discussion evolves. After at least 3 rounds of conversation, participants share discoveries and insights in the plenary. The index cards with key contributions are clustered thematically on a large wall, allowing ideas to be combined, allowing areas of agreement and patterns to emerge. The World Café is supported by this simple list of guidelines. Focus on what matters, on what really matters to you. Contribute your thinking and experience. Speak your mind, but also your heart, trying to listen actively with empathy to understand others' opinions. Try to link and connect ideas and listen together for patterns, insights, or deeper connections. So in the past year, more and more communities and organizations have experimented with hosting World Cafés in virtual spaces. To do so, it is necessary to combine a virtual conferencing platform such as Zoom or Teams with a whiteboard tool to design the café and document insights. I'm sharing here a virtual World Café setting used for an EU project called Open Heritage. You can see the 10 tables which corresponded to 10 breakout rooms. You can see the color-coded sticky notes waiting to be filled with bullet points in each table. And you can see the two guiding questions of the two discussion rounds. In this case, the first round of discussion was focusing on identifying challenges and opportunities related to their expert topic, and the second round was focusing on recommendations. In this slide, you can see examples of other virtual World Café settings using Miro and Wonder, which also try to convey the café atmosphere online. Those who joined the last webinar, where we simulated some exercises and we used Miro Live, you can recognize the difference between the whiteboard on the top, which is an empty canvas divided into tables, and the canvas on the right, which is busy with several people contributing in different tables and writing live sticky notes and ideas. So going back to our Open Heritage example, let's focus on the flow of the online World Café. So this online event starts with an introductory plenary in which instructions are provided and the guiding questions are presented. The participants are then randomly divided in 10 breakout rooms, which correspond to the 10 tables of the café, each one led by a table host. They are given access to the whiteboard and invited to zoom in on their table so as to be able to contribute to color-coded sticky notes. The first round focusing on challenges marked with red and opportunities marked with blue, and the second round focusing on recommendations marked with green. So colors help categorize already the different inputs on the whiteboard. You see, this World Café had 2 rounds of discussion, first one and second one lasting 20 minutes. Between the sessions, there is the need to come back to plenary for an energizer that will also allow time to the technical hosts to reorganize participants in different breakout rooms so they can meet more people, while hosts remain in the same table to facilitate cross-pollination of ideas. So once the second round of discussion is also completed, participants return to the plenary to share key insights. Depending on the available time and, of course, the backstage support provided, inputs from different tables can be visually clustered around key themes on a whiteboard, visualizing emerging patterns, commonalities, and differences. You can see here an example of how sticky notes from different tables have been organized to present an overview at the closing of the event and allow for input to be processed for a report to be shared with participants after the session. So the World Café method can be especially useful to foster idea co-creation and interactive discussion, allowing to identify patterns, nurture common ground, and mutual understanding. It enables to grow collective intelligence, since at the end of the second or third round, all of the tables in the room are cross-pollinated from insights from previous conversations. Last but not least, it encourages the emergence of possibilities for action. By providing opportunities for people to move in several rounds of conversation, ideas, questions, and themes begin to link and connect. In the case of coal regions, such a method can be, for example, used to build a common vision around just transition, to analyze stakeholders' needs and expectations, or to explore new ideas of collaboration and action. Now, let's move to our final method for the day, which bears some common features with the World Café, but allows more freedom, both in terms of timing, number of participants, and the topics discussed. So, open space, as the name indicates, is a participant-driven discussion process based on self-organization. It focuses around one key open question that can ignite multiple sub-questions or possible scenario. These can be as open as, for example, what does our community need to discuss today? Or more specific, like what actions do we need to take to ensure a just transition in our region? Or what are the preconditions for a just transition in our region? So although the time frame and location of sessions is predefined, the actual session topics and session leaders emerge during the opening plenary. So as shown in this diagram, the facilitator explains the open space process and invites participants to suggest topics, building an agenda of parallel sessions organized in different rooms over a number of time slots. According to the main questions, fewer or more participants will take initiative to suggest topics and lead sessions. Once the agenda is created, participants choose where they want to go, and multiple discussion groups convene simultaneously in different rooms. Discussion highlights are captured on site, either on simple notepads or in pre-designed canvases to enable a more uniform presentation of outcomes in the final plenary. Here you can see some examples of agendas that have emerged in different open space sessions, online and offline. Some slots may remain empty. Some others may require more time or attract more attention. The framework is free for adaptation to participants' needs, following the 4 principles and 1 law of the open space method. They may sound a bit vague, but they really enable this freedom of expression and movement. So whoever comes are the right people. Maybe the person introducing a topic will end up alone in the room. Maybe everyone will join one session, but whoever comes, it's the right people. Whenever it starts is the right time, and whenever it's over, it's over. Although time slots are predefined, they can be enhanced or reduced according to interest and the content that is being discussed. Whatever happens, happens, and the result is good enough, as long as people have taken initiative and discussed openly. And then there's one law, the law of 2 feet, it's called, which says that if during the course of the gathering, any person finds themselves in a situation where they're neither learning nor contributing, they can go to some more productive place. So in terms of roles, we have the initiators who propose a session topic, moderate and document discussion in one of the sessions. But participants can also choose the role of the bumblebee, which moves across sessions to cross-pollinate ideas, or choose the role of the butterfly, which remains an active listener and observer throughout the session and can comment on the process during the final plenary. So this flexible framework allows for different levels of engagement, especially for those who may find the process too chaotic or may need their time to onboard discussions. In an online setting, an open space follows the same flow and rules, but people move into different virtual rooms, that is, breakout rooms, for different sessions. The agenda of sessions is created on a shared whiteboard, like this one, for example, and there's an available time frame, parallel sessions again, with specific time for each session. This remains visible as a reference at any time in the main room of your online event. Proposed sessions are numbered, and the numbers correspond to breakout rooms. So each discussion moves to a breakout room and has its own whiteboard where notes can be kept. A tech host needs to remain in the main room at all times to help participants move around, so to assign them to different breakout rooms, or when they choose to change, to help them virtually rotate, let's say, rooms. So virtual initiators, virtual bumblebees, virtual butterflies participate in the open space and come back to the plenary session where all participants gather to exchange key insights from each session before a final wrap-up by the facilitator. So the more virtual platforms evolve, the more exotic open spaces can become. Here you can see an example using the platform gather.town, in which a Fishbowl session is used for the opening plenary to introduce the topic and have some initial insights. And then you can see an open space session, which is used to discuss 5 themes on 5 different virtual islands. So virtual platform engages to create different environments, and depending on the context of your project or your community, you can use this to create different rooms for your open space. So in terms of organizational change, open space is considered an unconventional, liberating structure based on self-organization and self-determination. It generates dynamic and fluid conversations. It can accommodate for large and diverse groups. It really unleashes creativity in an informal environment. It adopts this participant-driven approach and is an extremely flexible process with clear sense of purpose, building better working relationships and a sense of community. I have chosen this quote to close this section since it reflects why it is worth taking the risk of organizing an open space session. Liberating structures start with something so simple and essential as not to seem worth doing, and end up with something so powerful and profound that it hardly seems possible. Liberating structures introduce tiny shifts in the way people meet, plan, decide, and relate to one another. They put the innovative power once reserved for experts only in the hands of everyone. By design, liberating structures distribute control so that participants can shape direction themselves as the action unfolds. So depending on your strategic priorities in terms of multi-stakeholder consultations, the levels of commitment and engagement of your stakeholders, and your organizational capacity to implement new methods, you may find the methods presented today useful in their own terms or worth combining in different ways in online and offline settings. With this, we have now reached the end of our webinar. And we would like to share with you some final considerations, as well as 10 commandments, if we may say, for your upcoming stakeholder engagement efforts. So some of the key aspects we have presented in this webinar series, and which we would like you to keep in mind, are the following. First of all, the representativity of the sample. Who is invited, who participates, and how can we enable all voices to be heard? When this is not possible to ensure, we need at least to be conscious about it and not take for granted that the opinions expressed by a minority or an elite or the closest stakeholders actually represent the broader community. The second key aspect is the neutrality of the facilitation team. Who designs and manages the consultation process is key, and in that way you also need to think of how is this team or company selected and paid. So facilitation services are growing. I think in all your regions you can find expert companies and individuals working in this sector, but you need to plan ahead and ensure that you have budgeted and enabled the selection process to ensure this neutral facilitator or moderator. Then another aspect is the holistic analysis of outcomes. So to avoid biased, let's say, interpretations, it's important to consciously define who draws the conclusions and based on what political priorities. Unfortunately, we see a lot of consultation processes that fail to have this neutrality or representativity and are just used to tick the boxes of predefined decisions. How are inputs used? So how do we integrate the consultation outcomes to our policies or our plans is also key. To be conscious to what extent the process is consultative or binding. I understand that in the coal regions framework, most processes will be consultative, but we need to understand that in a global level, more and more online stakeholder consultations aim at binding results, which political representatives are committed to implement. Finally, last but not least, the transparency of the consultation process is key. To document, to make it accessible online, to make it referenceable in the long run is key to be able to ensure this transparency and also accountability of our process. Finally, we cannot hear you, Valeria. Let's see these 10 commandments.
I was muted. So sorry. Finally, and before moving to the Q&A part of this series of webinars, we wanted to highlight what we like to call the 10 commandments of stakeholder engagement. So the first one is to select the method and the platform and the tools very carefully. Do not engage with something that you don't know how it works, that you haven't studied enough. Really go for whatever you feel very, very comfortable doing, and that matches your needs and the needs of your participants. Secondly, and also very aligned to this, is to plan in advance and to avoid unpleasant surprises. Prepare a script, run a test session, think about the image that you are projecting, the lighting you are using, your microphone, everything needs to be really well prepared. Third, the moderators shall be selected very carefully. A good moderator must know the topic deeply and have a talent to engage the audience, but it doesn't have to have any kind of biases when moderating. And having two moderators is always a good idea. So plan with that if your budget allows for it. 4, be transparent and report after. Engage your participants and share the results of the event with them. Write the report, record the highlights, the quotes, facts, figures, and in a public and shared document. Sometimes if you ask them for explicit to explicitly use one of their pictures, they will be glad to see themselves as participants there. 5, train, learn, and improve. Just like Rome wasn't not built in a day, a high level of engagement is not achieved in one day. Practice makes the master, as for everything else. So take the time and one step at a time and do it well. Number 6, build over the previous results and see how your multi-stakeholder engagement process are linked in the terms of the target groups, topics, and the timing. 7, create a sense of community. Having an audience of regular, relevant participants will support the process in the long term. Number 8, listen actively and don't confront. Sometimes people need to vent and complain about everything that's going wrong with their lives. A good moderator will really know how to deal with that and how to move forward with such a person without confronting. From every comment, we can learn something, even from a person who is complaining nonstop. And number 9, develop an attractive and engaging program. Recruit good moderators and active speakers. Use the chat for icebreakers and interact with your audience using the online tools that we have mentioned before. And finally, dare to have fun and smile. So we hope both of us that you have really enjoyed this series of webinars, and now we are really ready to conduct and to hear what questions you have left for us with our colleague Martin. So Martin, I don't know what's left there for us in the 4 minutes that we have left.
Hi, how are you? So we have a couple of questions, and let me just get right into it. So one of them is kind of looking at the tools you presented. There are some people that have as participants, not so much as organizers. As participants have more or less experience with online engagements. Which one would you say from these tools that you presented is the one would require less previous knowledge from participants, so it would be the easiest to get into for people that are not so used to online consultation processes?
Mhm. Thank you. First of all, let me say that I'm having a look at these questions, and at the limited time we have, I think that most of them are actually answered in the series of webinars. So we do recommend you review the previous ones if you haven't seen them, because they do mention the different levels of engagement and the different, let's say, level of expertise that participants need to have in order to join. Today, among the 5 methods we have presented, I would say they are ranked already. So we go from this one way, let's say, presentation of Pechakucha formats to the completely self-organized open space. And each of these methods is a bit more open, a bit more complicated, and a bit more interactive, both in offline and offline settings. So yeah, the ranking is the one presented today. And you can refer also to the methods, the workshop methods presented in the last webinar to see some additional co-creation tools that can be useful. As said, sometimes it is worth having even a preparation session, so to allow participants either to join a bit before or even on a separate day to have a little training or a little test on the actual tools. This can be especially useful when engaging people of older age or people with less familiarity with IT tools. Just jumping to the next question. Yes, skilled facilitators. Indeed, do not overestimate your capacity in that field. There are more and more experts working and trained in virtual facilitation, but also moderation of panels and discussion in the physical space. So yes, we would highly recommend that you invest in that you research which companies or which freelance professionals organize such processes in your region and start building strategic partnerships with them so that you have neutral people, external people facilitating the dialogue. It is very important to be able to have, to avoid tensions between political representatives and constituents, for example, but also to enable a more objective analysis of the process. And the last question, the scope of information provided to participants before these meetings. It's a very good question. Indeed, well, this depends on the topic, of course. If it's highly technical, you may want to share a fact sheet with some basic data about, for example, the energy mix of your region or the plan that you want feedback on. But if you want a completely open discussion about a vision, let's say, or starting from scratch to think about actions, then you may not need to share in-depth information before. Both, I mean, we have seen timelines in our previous webinars. We think that people need to be aware at least a month in advance of the actual event and get reminders and necessary information at least 1 week in advance. Last-minute reminders are useful also for people to, for example, easily find the link or the passwords needed to access the consultation process. So it is really a matter of creating a timeline that informs in time, but also provides this live and last-minute support. And that's how we got to noon. So thank you for your question. We hope that at the end of this series, you have gained a better understanding of virtual facilitation, of what it entails, and that you feel more confident to experiment with online stakeholder engagement processes. We will be happy to receive a little feedback message in the chat about your main takeaways or recommendations for future webinars. On behalf of the European Commission and the Coal Regions in Transition Initiative, thank you very much for your participation. You can already access the recordings of the first 2 webinars on the YouTube channel of DG ENER, and we promise to upload the recording of this 3rd webinar in the coming days. We wish you strength, stamina, and inspiration in your ongoing Just Transition efforts and creative experimentation in scaling up online stakeholder engagement in your region. Leave us a feedback note. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Have a nice day. Bye.